Who knows?
What's up, brother? How are you?
Man, I'm great. I am. I'm great. I'm busy for fuck's sake. Like my schedule is just like, man, it's, I feel like I'm getting beat up in the surf right now. That's the way life feels. That's how life feels. Like, that's how my schedule feels. Just like boosh, boosh, boosh. I'm on a plane every 2 or 3 days. I've got, opened up a coffee shop in Clarksville, Tennessee. I've got another one. I
saw that, man. Congratulations.
Texas.
Congrats, man. Congrats. When are we going to get one? When are we going to get one down here in Southeast Florida, bud?
ASAP. I'm working on that right now. I've been trying to work with one of my good friends down there. He actually helped me with the Bass Pro deal that we did last 2 years ago. And I kind of promised him that he would get dibs on the first shop there in Florida.
Well, I don't care who has first dibs, man. We just need to start populating. We got a truckload of gun owners, and I mean, this state is ready for some Black Rifle stores, brother. I just know it in my heart.
That state is so awesome, man. I was down there Jared and I went down there for a boat race. So I did a P1 offshore race out
Very
in Tampa.
Cool. Yeah.
The place is amazing. It really is. It probably gets hot as fuck in the summertime, I would imagine.
It's a little steamy. It's a little Philippine like, it's
moist.
A little wet, a little moist.
Yeah, it's moist.
But you get used to the moisture, that's why they make fanny packs and flip-flops. So it's there for you, bud. But we need you. We need you. You are integral in the fight, and we just gotta see them everywhere. It was so funny though. I watched the documentary on Netflix about the last Blockbuster. I don't know if you've watched that yet.
I haven't seen that.
Oh God, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And they went from 9,000 stores in 2004, right? The biggest ever. Yeah. And now they're down to one store in Bend, Oregon.
Whoa.
And it's just fascinating to hear. And a lot of people think that they got hammered because of Netflix but that's not the case. What happened when Viacom came in and bought them from Wayne Heisinger, they ended up saddling all the company's debt on Blockbuster.
Oh,
and so Blockbuster was, because they had such great cash revenue that they transferred all this debt over onto them, and that's what destroyed the company. It wasn't Netflix. It wasn't. I mean, the story, I guess, was they had an opportunity to buy Netflix.
Yeah. I heard that,
but they didn't.
That's not true.
What?
Is that not true?
Yeah, they had an opportunity, but they were like, because they at the point when Netflix was in their business model, they were grabbing a truckload of market share, and they were primed for streaming and all the other things. It's just it was the debt that destroyed them.
Okay, I got to watch that. That's a great recommendation.
Yes, for you, it is a great recommendation to watch.
I just want to know: did the founder did he make a lot of money when he sold to Viacom?
Oh, it was $8.7 billion.
Oh, good. That's enough. I like to hear the stories where the founders sell and then somebody else fucks it completely up. That's the stories. Those are the stories. Actually, the stories I like to hear are just like they don't fuck it up and they just keep going and doing it.
Yeah. Well, that's always possible. That's entirely up to you all at that C-suite level and the decisions you're making, and you always seem to be making good decisions. So.
That's not true. Yeah, that's not true. I think you've got a lot of MBAs out there that they know how to put together a really good PowerPoint, and they know how to put together meeting after meeting after meeting. You got a lot of really capable MBAs that know how to organize information to make it look good. Mm-hmm. Now there's a lot of obviously super competent executives because they're driven, they're fucking amazing. Like TD is a great example. Tom Davin, the guy that we have in my co-CEO role. He's great. He's awesome. And so is the president of the company, this guy, Scott Harvey. He's great too. These guys are fairly, they come with really wide shoulders, right?
Right.
But man, when I interface with a lot of other executives, it's from other companies, I realize like just how lucky we are, because there's a lot of people they're lost. They're fucking lost. They don't know what their mission is. They don't know how to, task organize and fucking execute. And it starts getting nuts to me, because I'm like, you guys, this is all a team sport. You're just organizing projects and getting shit across the line based on your mission statement. There's really not a lot of fucking rocket surgery going on here.
Well, there is. And the rocket surgery is within the human psychology, right? I mean, right. I remember a few years ago, right after Wells Fargo had the big ordeal with the checking thing, and they were, doing some shady stuff. And I went up to a private wealth group up in the McLean area in Virginia, right, and sat down, and I was around 12 executives, all people part of these big teams in there. And I'm like, all right, so let's go around. Let's, what is the mission statement and culture of your organization right now? And, by the eighth person around, they were like, well, I'm just not sure right now. We're waiting for corporate and this, and the guy, like this one dude finally had the chutzpah to stand up and say, we don't know. And we can't know because we have to wait until we're told what it is. And it's creating a massive messaging problem for our clients that are like, all right, I don't, I'm not going to put my $25 million with you because you guys have no idea what direction you're going. You don't know what's up. And plus you're shady. So I'm going to go over here to UBS or Merrill Lynch or whatever. And you find it, man, the bigger the organization, the way the messaging kind of trickles down, it just doesn't make it. And then somehow in between, I think, that mid-level management, and this is where I really see the greatest challenges out there, is that mid-level management is not, because everybody's having to do more things, right? Running leaner, doing more things, asking them to be more autonomous, to get out there and go try new, especially in the markets we're in right now. And they're doing it, but they're not sure how to do it or why to do it or which direction to go. And then when they do it and they fail, they don't come back and say, all right, everybody, please sit up. Let's have a debrief. This is what went wrong. This is what went right. Hey, you guys, I heard you might be doing it. Don't go do this, do this. And I think, to your point exactly, this is a team sport. And if executives, there's a built-in ideology that, it's also you kill what you eat.
Yeah.
And so that
you got to reinforce hunting. Yeah.
And that competitive nature can bleed over into kind of stifling someone else having a good idea, or, those little jockeying for position or who's going to get the next opportunity to run a particular group or division or whatever. And I think, that's what you guys have an advantage with, is that you guys come from a true meritocracy in terms of everybody's military background, that, hey, no, listen, there'll be promotions and there'll be advancements, but at the end of the day, it at least from the outside in and knowing you for as long as I've known you, man, that's the driver, right? That's the driver. You push, every level, especially that mid to upper level management, in a way that it is team orientation, it is team culture. And that makes the difference.
Well, there's a couple thoughts there, which is there's the counter narrative that team sports are not important, right? Team sports are not important in, as a culture, as a society, as a nation. My counter to that is, they're absolutely important, because they teach people how to solve complex problems where there are things at stake, right? Where you want to teach winners. You want to teach people to be out there and being we would say, a good steward of competition as well, right? You want to teach people that are ethical in order to, how do you win appropriately? How do you lose appropriately? What does it mean to win ethically? And when you look at the internal psychology of team sports, meaning there's a coach, there's a team captain, there are different roles that people have to play, and each one of those roles will obviously directly benefit the win or loss. And then they have to work together, right? They have to work together to accomplish a goal. Like that's life, man.
Yeah.
Like when you look at it, it's just hyper focused into an activity for a short amount of time. And yeah, you might have a running back in this position, but really it's teaching people how to function within a role and be a team player. Those things they all mean very significant things in life, right? So if every person is an individual and being a team doesn't matter and everybody's the same, right? It's like everybody's the same, meaning we have no, gender classification or like, everybody's the same. No, there are unique differences between each and every one of us, and they directly contribute to the success of society.
Amen.
And like, if we can just kind of figure that out, and that's where it's like, man, it's so confusing to me to hear things like, well, team sports are not important. Like everybody gets a participation trophy. Well, that's counterintuitive to the entire human experience, by the way. Everybody doesn't get a fucking trophy. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah. It has never been that way.
No.
If you don't win, you die for a grand portion of our existence, right?
Right.
But when as you pull up the team orientation and how everybody plays an individual role in a collective mission, I think for listeners, everybody's heard so many of our veteran-based stories, that when I worked with the Boston Red Sox, and by the third year, my role had advanced, and now it was, all right, the focus was being able to really create a leadership development program for Mookie Betts. Because here was this young kid who was, the franchise, he was everything, but right. I remember the first time, and it was all a derivative of Dustin Pedroia leaving and making way for Mookie to come into that leadership role. But here he's this kid. And I remember the first time sitting down with him and directly asking him, hey, Mookie, have you ever had any leadership training? And he was like, nope. And this is a guy that is now the head of a 15 to $17 billion organization with 25 million fans around the world. And they're asking this kid, we need you to carry the team and do all this. And it's like, I've never, I don't even know what that looks like. I go, well, how do you describe leadership? And for most people that are driven in some capacity, I think it's relative to if my actions are at a high level, people will naturally want to follow me.
Right.
And that's great. And that works to a certain extent, but there is a whole nother component of reciprocation, right? Mm-hmm. When somebody looks to you for influence, you feed them back with that influence they're looking for.
Right.
And so often people don't know how to ask, hey, Evan, how do I do this right now? What do you recommend? Or whoever is asking up the chain of command, are you going to your co-CEO and saying, tell me about your experience with Taco Bell. How does franchising work? Is that possible? And is that part of our model? I don't understand it. And then seeking the information from the external players, right? The people that do have specialties, you don't. And I think we were able to really take these other guys, the David Price, the Mitch Morelands, Brock Holtz, these guys who had been around the league for a long time. And my thing was, hey, you guys have to subtly influence him from the side, not from a direct assault, because he's so fixated on performing on a field, but from the side, and prop him up and say, you're doing right. You're doing well. This is good. And if there is an issue, just say, hey, think about maybe changing it or tweaking it this much instead of, and halt, stop. All right, we're going into class here. You're on your whiteboard and this is what a leader means and stuff. And it's more fluid than that. And I think organizations right now, at least from what I'm hearing, and again, it's still slow out there for me, but, is really about saying, all right, this is my area of expertise, but I also need to be contributed with my area of expertise on your area, but we have to do it together. And if someone hasn't had that great exposure to that type of team orientation, and they become fractionalized, right? Everybody splits off and they're jockeying for their time to it's like the guys, remember, you always knew those dudes who were getting their fit rep just right. And they were studying for the test, and they were jockeying for the rank,
right,
instead of the experience that would give them the rank. And in many cases, they were able to do that.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because when we start to unpack this and we think about just leadership in general, right? Well, one, I think that leadership it's not taught in corporate America enough, right? It's not taught. It needs to be taught in it. I've been teaching my girls, or at least what I think is reinforcing leadership traits from the time that they could walk. How do you influence your sister? I have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. It's like your actions influence your sister. You have to take responsibility for your actions. So you're a leader regardless of whether or not you think you are or not. What does it mean to lead? Right? Sometimes it's just example, as you identified earlier. So how do you lead by example? Well, it's not just good behavior. It's also positive psychology, right? It's not just directly saying, well, I made my bed, or, for a child, picked up my toys. It's also the example of good behavior, which is positive psychology. How do you help? How do you encourage? How do you support? And we don't teach that in our schools, which is fucking amazing to me that we don't teach it, because you have to teach it at home. Obviously, we know that. Yeah. And I think the majority of the responsibility for any American parent is to teach leadership. Unfortunately, there's not enough people that understand what real leadership is. So they're also in a void of information, and they're turning to, we'll say, the wrong examples to kind of find reference material. And it's one of the things I love, like what you do and what Jocko and these guys do, is because you guys teach leadership and you have really profound examples. But to go back to my point, if we at least had a curriculum of development and that started early, it's like, this is what it's like to be a leader, and everybody has to lead, and you get a turn, right? So can you imagine if we were teaching our kids in elementary school, like it's your turn to lead. It's your turn to be responsible for the day. Yeah. You're going to be responsible for this. You're going to make sure that everybody gets this done. And I remember very, very acutely that the first time I think I really felt that type of responsibility was in the military.
Really? You never had any time before that where you were on a team, or you were out in the woods and someone was woefully underprepared, or a friend was in a tough time and you guided them through that? There was never a time before that you felt like, wow, that gut feeling, I need to step in to assist or to show or to direct. You never felt that?
I think, it was all about me. Right. So as a teenager and, as an adolescent and a teenager, I think that you're so self-consumed. It takes a lot of parenting and coaching to pull a person, at least a teenager, or just kind of the anomaly, like the statistical anomaly of the small fractions of kids, which I knew them, that were automatically understood leadership or could inherently pick it up based on their environment. I just wasn't that smart. So it was all about me. And then once, traveling to Fort Benning and being really rural, and to rewind, I guess, yeah, of course, I was on teams, right? So on a baseball team and a soccer team. And, I wrestled when I was really young, and I played a lot of sports. So I understood what it was like to be on a team, but I didn't understand what it was like to lead a team, because I was always the coach, right? The coach was the leader, or the guy that had the most talent, and I never had the most talent. So that was never really an option. But it's interesting how people confuse individual performance-based talent and leadership too.
Yeah.
Because that's where people get really fucked up, because they're like, well, this guy's an incredible baseball player, or he's an incredible football player. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you should follow him. Or that doesn't mean he's a good person. That doesn't mean that the example that he's setting or her is the example that you want to follow, right? It just means they're good at their sport.
And many times the best on the team is really the person that has put the most effort in off season or whenever, when no one's looking. Right. And then they step on and they see that they're better. So they become a more selfish player, and then they score the most goals. They whatever it might be. And then they're the de facto leader.
Right.
And every sports team I've ever worked with, that's what I see is the best player, kind of somehow rises to the occasion where they're become captain of the team or whatever.
Right.
And they're not the captain of the team. They're just the best player, and they don't want to be captain of the team, but yet, someone's like, all right, you're the best, you're captain. And we see this how often. I mean, you probably see it in your organization, right? You have the best salespeople out there. They're killing it. They're dominating. They're crushing. They're having massive sales. And someone's like, well, let's make them manager of all the salespeople, and you're like,
doesn't always work.
That's not a good idea. And
doesn't always work.
And trying to identify, hey, the best sales guy doesn't mean they're going to be the best leader.
Right.
And there is a distinct difference. Yeah. So,
there's a huge difference.
Right? Do you remember? I'm sorry, Evan. I just have this. I want to ask you this question real quick because I'm so fascinated. I've always been fascinated with your perspective of leadership, especially now because you're moving into that place where you're part of a giant company and you're in that role. Do you remember the first person that you met or integrated with and said, now that's a leader. That's a person whose style I like. I like how they engage with me. I like how they engage with my teammates. Do you remember any of those people?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think early on, I didn't quite understand, what I was looking at when I was in junior high and high school. There's a guy that was in my hometown. He's a former Green Beret. And he was one of those guys where it was like, that's the kind of guy, he's a little bit crazy, a little bit crass, a little bit crazy. But it was like, that's somebody, I really want to be like, right? But management style, I think the military really gave you a lot, or gave me a lot of examples to, that's the type of leader that I want to be. That's the type of manager I want to be. And most of those guys were the guys that were really kind of funny, but they were also pretty serious, right? So they had this like very distinct switch that they could provide levity and at the same time organize and execute like nobody's fucking business.
Yeah.
One of those guys is still one of my best friends today.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
He's a command sergeant major still. One of these days he'll get out. But just seeing him, because he was an E6, I was an E5 when we first met, and just seeing his style and the way that he could go from being one of the guys to being in charge so fluidly, it was incredible. And it was an interesting lesson because before that point, I didn't think that you could be one of the guys, nor could you be in charge, right? But it's all based on your individual perspective, your individual psychology, your communication style. Like, do people respect you? Are they willing to follow? Like, there's a difference between understanding how to integrate yourself into the peer perspective, right? And understanding how to manage and lead and perform that function. You can go in and out. There's a very distinct personality type, and it's very rare. It's very rare. But most of the time, those guys, I think, are some of the best leaders that I've ever met, specifically in the military, because they can come down, they can go up. And there are so few people that understand how to do that. They're a national treasure and a precious commodity. When you can go down and identify with subordinates and peers in a true and authentic way, connect with people and be empathetic and understand what they're going through, and then understand how to solve their problems, and then move back up in order to manage and lead, while maintaining perspective without getting too narcissistic or, the wide variety of kind of ego-driven circumstances in these roles. Those are the people that we should be writing fucking books about and teaching curriculum about, right?
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. And I, the challenge, right? And I think is it goes back to that ability to see those influences and go, that's the right leadership. That's not the right. And then, but it's so easy nowadays to say, well, that's how you make it to the top. You've got to backstab.
Yeah.
You've got to be subversive. You've got to be out for yourself, right? Go out, be out. You got to look out for yourself. I mean, if I hear that anymore, I'm gonna vomit and continuously all day. Especially when you see it in such a blatant way, and it is about, I think, that transcendence of power, right? It's about the application in the right appropriate time, pulling off, applying. When you were talking about, I just went back to thinking about Alexander the Great, and he would ride through the camp or walk through the camp and sit down at the fires with his men after battle and drink with them, and whatever. And there's you get to that point. Well, why would people go on a campaign all the way to Afghanistan or India with some human being with armies of 100, 200, 300,000 strong, and the conditions are got to be miserable.
Yeah.
But you do it because you anything this dude tells you to do is like you want to do it with him because you believe in him, and you're going to follow him to the ends of the earth. And in many cases, tens of thousands did. And so the question always becomes: is that teachable? Can you teach that perspective? And because I know. And I think we've talked about it before is how do you identify the individuals that either have the capacity or propensity for it, but just have never been exposed to it in such a definitive manner. Hey, listen, I'm seeing you react to something on an emotional way. I'm seeing you say, all right, this is a time, but I'm also seeing the fear that's inside you to take a step forward and make the influence. Have a teaching moment, create it. Don't be afraid. Step over the threshold and become the leader that you're feeling is in you. And trying to get people to do that is challenging. And as you guys have gotten bigger, how do you guys do that? How do you guys see that and promote that and foster that type of direct influence?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, because as the company gets bigger, you have internal communications, and at this point we have 550 people, give or take, in the company. So you have your internal influence, and you have external influence, and you have to look at your communication channels, right? So what are the individual communication channels we have to communicate externally and internally? So externally, it's obviously the media, right? So a lot of this is external media. And one of the things that I've really focused on is we don't partake in negative information, right? We entertain, we inform, and we inspire. Those are three things. And we stick to a mission statement, which is be a great fucking company. That's all my mission statement is. So
I love that so much.
So what does it mean to be a great fucking company? Well, you got to make best in class media. You can't partake in the mudslinging on the internet, right? You have to rise above it. What does it mean to be a great fucking company? It means you have to roast the greatest fucking coffee that is possible, right? You have to print and, develop the best apparel. But more importantly, what it means is you have to recruit, hire, and then provide the ability for people to have economic mobility, opportunity, and fulfillment within the company, because that's the heart, right? That's what actually matters. If the internal internal aspects of the company, if that's rotten, it doesn't fucking matter what you do on the external communication, right? It doesn't matter. Then it just becomes information operations. You're just trying to mitigate the fact that you're a burning trash heap of ethics. And I think there is a lot of companies that run like that. To be fair, I really do. I think there are a lot of people that they exploit the ability to put out misinformation, right? And one of the things that I've really focused on the last couple of months is how do we maintain authenticity as we continue to grow? How do you scale a company and maintain the soul of the company? Because what happens with a lot of companies is you start running solely based on profit. Right? So how do we grow and continue to scale and maintain a profit? And that becomes a very sociopathic endeavor when you're only trying to look at how you can cut costs and increase profit. It is capitalism, don't get me wrong, but I believe in a blended aspect of capitalism where it's more ethically driven capitalism. So there's capitalism in the context of it's Machiavellian, it's sociopathic, it's anything for a profit. So it's very exploitive, right? And then you have, how do we provide the greatest amount of opportunity, the greatest amount of good internally and externally? And that's a balancing act. And you have to continue to come back to that all the time, by the way. It is a constant, both internal and external campaign for yourself to be like, how do I lead? How do I lead as a company gets bigger? I can't be everywhere at all times. I have two, beautiful children and a wonderful wife too, that also needs me. So how do you manage your work-life balance, and how do you continue to be out and talk to people? Because one of my favorite things in the world is stepping into the company and high-fiving people and talking to them about their day and what they're doing and what their ambitions are, not just print that fucking shirt or roast the coffee, right? Like that sucks, man. Like not to oversimplify it, but I think there's a lot of companies or corporations that they have to train their executives to go out and schedule time with people, because they're like, you got to go out and schedule time with people to figure out, you've got to listen.
Yeah.
Or you could just be that person that wants to go out and spend time with people and listen to them, because that's your natural instinct. So to your point, by no means am I saying that I'm the best leader. That's not what I'm referring to. I'm saying there are a lot of incredible leaders out there that I've been able to kind of go, oh yeah, I get that, right? And I'm constantly pursuing excellence in that regard. And you have to continue to do it. So it never ends.
Well, your perspective at 50 people is not the same as your perspective at 500 people.
Right.
Your perspective at one store is not the same perspective at 100 stores. And so just like your skill sets, operationally, as soon as you become complacent, the battlefield takes over.
Right.
And it is a constantly evolving battlefield. And I think now, especially with a lot of what corporate America is beginning to reflect upon, goes against what consumers want to contend with.
Right.
And being able to stay true to that internal drive as a leader, as well as, hey, our influence as a company and what our mission is to provide the best coffee there is on the market, to provide an incredible work environment, and to be the best fucking company there is. And to maintain the simplified perspective of that, I think is what is enabling you all, to continue doing what you're doing. And it also is, what an opportune time, right? Right. I think the people in America are looking for a counterbalance to kind of the presumption of monopolies, and you coming in and being able to be a legitimate contender to Starbucks and to Dunkin' and to all these other organizations that people are we're so nuanced in our consumerism, right? And because there are so many choices.
Yeah.
So to find to find a choice that's representation of our core understanding of ourself and what we like, and then you have great tasting coffee, man, you're ripe for that growth. And to be able to identify that market is also another component of leadership too, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think as we look around and we look at some of the places where we purchase from, does anybody really like or understand what Amazon is, for instance, right? What it really is? I don't think so. I don't think anybody really understands, Jeff Bezos, his political affiliation or his wife's political affiliation, or what they think about the world, or how they feel about Americans or people. Like, do we really understand? No, because Jeff Bezos isn't out there talking about his ideas all the time. And I'm not identifying him as a bad human, by the way. I'm just saying we don't know. So people purchase based on convenience. There's the convenience factor. And I think that directly contributes to the position that we're in as a nation too, because when you purchase based on convenience and we'll call it price, you can directly contribute to things that are contrary to what you believe in
or beliefs.
Yeah. And I think that's what you're seeing, because I was reading something just the other day about how big corporations ultimately they contribute to the executives. They contribute typically to both sides, both Democrat and Republican, and because they're just trying to hedge their bets at the end of the day. And I say, yeah, I've absolutely done that too, because there are people that I believe in, right? Like Tulsi Gabbard's a friend of mine. Dan Crenshaw's a friend of mine. I consider them friends. I want to support them. I don't care if there's a D or an R. I just think like they're good people and I understand who they are. But I think there's a big percentage of executives that really believe in things that are directly contrary to what most of their consumers believe in. I think the majority of people using Google in the United States right now would probably not identify with the socioeconomic beliefs of the corporate executive suite of Google. I really believe that. I think they would be appalled as to what they believe in. They'd be like, "You guys are Marxists." I mean, truly, right? I mean, they're not. They're Stalin socialists. Like they're not. Or they're really inherently broken because they live inside a very exclusive bubble of people that are in an echo chamber in the nicest weather pattern in the world, by the way, and one of the most economically stable countries in the most economically stable states in the most isolated zip code in the United States. So of course you're going to have this perspective on life that is very different than the flyover states or, different states where there might be guys jumping in Bass Pro, fish tanks, right? It's very interesting to me that more people don't expect more. Like we want to hear, we want to understand what's going on within the company. And there should be a lot of companies that are like, hey, listen, we don't play in politics. We're just trying to sell you shit. That's it. So buy it or don't buy it. But we don't play in it. That's great too, because there's a lot of people that are just not politically inclined and they don't want to discuss it because they're like, I don't get involved in it.
Well, they definitely don't want it in every aspect of their lives, right? And that's why you're seeing these areas where typically people go to relieve themselves of that, especially after the last year of that impending doom, if you will. Right. And when now all of a sudden, I have to contemplate all of this as I'm looking forward to the All-Star game, or I'm going to buy a Coca-Cola, or I'm hopping on a Delta airline. Right. It's like, hey man, listen, and man, please, just let me watch, and you can see the result. I mean, Coca-Cola came out and supported it, and then a week later they said, well, maybe we need to reevaluate, and then and
it's weird how that works.
Yeah, and then Walmart came out and said, nope, we're non-political. We're not. We support everybody and justice. That's what we want. And you're starting to see there'll be this balancing, I think, But again, as you and I know, when leadership is lacks the understanding of everybody's opinions or viewpoints, you start to have those issues, right? You start to have those serious issues.
Sergeant Best! On target, on time, boys! Fire for a flip! Here we go! Set! You heard him! Fire for a flip!
Well, going back to what we were talking about, which is, I think I've kind of shifted the corner into just the way that we do business, in the sense of, I used to classify us as a conservative company. I was like, hey, we're a conservative company. Now I say I'm truly a man without a party, because the GOP doesn't represent all my beliefs.
Yeah.
Right. And the DNC doesn't either. Like I actually find them both fairly repugnant, to be quite fair. Mm-hmm. And so I really have to kind of, what I tell people is, like, I'm just trying to make sure that people know who we are and what we do, regardless of political affiliation. This is just who we are, right? I have terabytes of me running my fucking suck on this podcast. And at the end of the day, if people like it, they like it. If they don't, there's a lot of other coffee options out there. I'm going to be fine. Like I'm going to be all right. Like I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Like people get all spicy, and like at the end of the day, I'm not going to sacrifice my individual authenticity of like who I am, so I can placate to a larger audience, so I can sell more coffee. Right. My dad was a welder and a logger. I grew up in northern Idaho with basically nothing. And I spent the majority of my life literally sleeping in shipping containers. I don't give a fuck. Like, truly don't. Like me, don't like me, like the company, don't like it. I don't care. We're a great fucking company. So if you want to buy your shit from a great company, good. But I think for me, that's what I want other people to hold their consumer ethics, hold them accountable as far as like, who are they buying from? I was just reading this morning on the way into work, which I shouldn't be, but I was like throwing through it at the stoplight. Amazon's union, and I don't understand a lot of what's going on.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but I think it's super interesting, because you have kind of the corporate narrative is very progressive, and it supports more this
the teachers
Marxist genre. Yeah, right. It's like more of like kind of a Marxist kind of fringe ideology, but they sure as shit don't want unions in their company. So they're ultra capitalist.
Sorry about that, brother.
That's all right. But I think it's super interesting how the corporation itself is contributing and then putting out a lot of what we'll call it more socialist driven information. That's what they support. That's what they believe in. Everybody's, blah, 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 right? Like, but they sure as shit don't want unions in their company. So it's like,
no.
Yeah. Okay. No, so I see where you guys are headed. I see what you're doing, right? So like, can we all just level set and be like, oh, so they actually don't fucking believe anything they say. What they're trying to do is they're trying to win the information war. They're trying to be on the side of, the AOCs and we'll call it one perspective of the country, because that's when they understand how they can kind of yield the most power across the United States. But internally, they're the most capitalistic company in America. They're the largest. I think they are the largest company in America at this point. So their executives are like, everybody, let's just be socialists unless it's inside our company. And then you better not be, or we're going to be like hiring the Pinkerton gang to come in and beat you up, right?
Those damn Pinkerton.
It's fucking nuts, man. And it's
hypocrisy at its finest. Yeah.
It's so hypocritical. You're right.
And that goes back to this, the mixed message of leadership, right?
Right.
And because leadership is more than just influencing other people. Leadership is about standing for something. And how do you, and when people know where you stand, then it makes it easier for them to say, all right, I want to follow that individual.
Yeah.
If they don't know where you stand and you change all the time, it puts people in this, in a state of flux and uneasy. Right. And then it's like you're desperate for some guidance. Mm-hmm. And I think, when you start to see leaders choosing that level of influence through fear and through this righteousness, right? This social righteousness that's being permeated just about every place you look now. You can't escape it. It's putting people, they don't know where to stand. And they're really, it's like the line is drawn.
Right.
And I think everybody's like, all right, how do we all need to get on our sides and all this.
Yeah.
And then there's a large percentage of people out there is like, no, I don't want this definitive line in the sand all the time.
No,
I want to be able to step over here because some of the things I dig there or step here. But if you're telling me, if you're two-facing me on a message, I can't do that. And you're two-facing me on a message too. So I'm just going to stand back here and then voice my opinion now. And that thankfully is an opportunity. Unfortunately, the powers that be are not happy about a lot of those voices that are being projected. And there's some censorship, definitely a lot of censorship going on right now. But I think, there's a great swell coming back up. And once, some leader, i.e. whether it's, what's his name? Mike Lindell starting My Store, or his social media called Frank, where there'd be no swearing. So we're fucking off that for sure.
Right. Yeah,
but whoever it is that's going to pop up to create a new place for new narratives, I think people are waiting for that, and there'll be this mass exodus off Google, off Facebook, off Instagram, and the others. Having been off it for about 6 months now, it was tough at first last time we talked, but now it's nice. I'm not inundated with it every day, all day. And I'm able, if I'm like, look over at John, I'm like, hey, how's Evan doing? She'll bring up your feed and, oh, that's awesome, man. And
so did you get off intentionally, or did they kick you off?
Well, they labeled my website about 2 years ago against community standards and guidelines. And then I couldn't post anything on Team Frog Logic. And then about 2 months before the election, I got locked out of Instagram. No explanation, no nothing. Had several people reach out in the fall. And then, Parler started, and I've been off Twitter for 2 years. I just, once I saw them start censoring people, I was like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm out.
And plus there's so much vitriol on Twitter that wasn't my speed. I didn't want to be in any of that. You know what I do, and I try and stick there. And then I never heard anything back. And then finally, a buddy that I used to contract with has a friend that does internal investigations with it in Facebook, and had him push it through. And they came back and said, we think he might have been hacked, or they gave some wildly ambiguous answer.
Interesting.
And then here's the kicker. Then they gave me a new sign in because, and I go to sign in. They're like, you can't sign in until all your external things are turned, my VPNs are turned off. We won't let you sign in until your VPNs are off and all this. And I was just like, forget this. I'm not even doing it. I'm still on LinkedIn, most just for business reasons. But then later I found out the guy at Facebook, after checking in on my stuff, all of his managers started ghosting him. Yeah. So finally, my buddy, who had originally came to me and said, dude, it's not anything serious,
Right.
It's you just, there was you got hacked or something.
Right.
And then he comes back and goes, bro, I think it was something more sinister because my buddy's now completely ghosted by his managers and stuff.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing I don't understand is I've listened to your stuff for years and I'm thinking, what on earth were you promoting or doing that could possibly be seen as controversial? I don't know.
I have no idea. I mean, maybe it's what I was following, what I was liking, what I was stopping at, my scrolls. I definitely now, having been paying attention, it's quite obvious that, let's call it the powers that be, feel very threatened by our community.
Right.
Feel very threatened because we have big voices. We're able to, we're able to articulate well thought out ideas and influence people down those ideas and directions. We also have a profound amount of tactical understanding.
Yeah.
And when you see that DOD hires an inclusivity manager, right, that's not inclusive himself to directly go after the special operations community.
Yeah.
What's that saying? It's like, well, there's an internal threat they believe that goes against the ideas that they're promoting. And for me, this whole concept of domestic terrorism is just it's just a continuation. I don't know if you remember, there was a paper that was released back at the end of the Obama administration that essentially, but the FBI kind of put out that the greatest threat to our democracy is former special operations members that become disgruntled.
Yep. Well, I think, and I think Hillary Clinton had said something like that in one of her rallies too. The greatest threat to the democracy was something, right? And it's so interesting to me because you think about the warfighter, right? You think about the warfighter in the last 20 years, the burden that the warfighter has ultimately carried. And once again, it goes back to hypocrisy in leadership, which is, so the political elite class, we'll call them, on both sides, whether they're DNR, doesn't really matter to me. They vote in and activate the warfighter to go overseas and ultimately fight in two fairly expansive and really, they're large scale.
$6 trillion wars.
$6 trillion wars, right? And then they say, okay, when we look at even Iraq, and I've had this conversation a few times, I'm sure people from FRA are getting sick of me talking about Iraq. But when I think about just the facts associated with the so-called facts associated with the invasion of Iraq, they ultimately debunked those over time, right? There wasn't weapons of mass destruction. There's still kind of a counter narrative that floats around out there that's like, no, there was, but it got across the border into Syria. It's like, no, that's all been disproven. That's all just complete fucking fictional bullshit, right? It's just complete fiction. They didn't have the capacity, the technology, the personnel to mount any large scale threat to even their neighbors because their economy was collapsing, sanctions were working, isolation was working. So we spent a few $1 trillion and several thousand people lost life, limb, and eyesight, doing a war of occupation in a country that both D's and R's voted to invade. And now all of a sudden it's our fault. And because they don't want to take accountability. And oh, by the way, these are the same people that are in office today. Like, might I remind everyone, John Kerry was part of that entire fucking shit show, right? Hillary Clinton was a senator, right? Whether you like George Bush or not, it's irrelevant to me because, Don Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney and George Bush and all these guys, they were never a warfighter. I don't care who they are. They were never warfighters. They didn't understand it.
They understood the financial and the geostrategic nature of it.
They sure did.
Hell yeah, they did.
Yeah, they understood I think it's not as sinister as sometimes I kind of waft back and forth, but I think it's less sinister than I think some people would say because they think that it's all about profit, right? And I'm like, no, I think you had a group of neocons, both left and right, that believed the world. They believed in nation building, and they believed that we needed to take the
initiative,
the initiative to go out and start rolling. We'll call it, former, regime change and nation building, right? I think they truly believed in that. I think they believed that they could do it, which just the fucking ego associated with believing that you could change Iraq in less than a generation or Afghanistan. I was reading a meme the other day and it was like, man, we're pulling out of Afghanistan, but we're only 50 years away from victory. Come on, guys, right? But there's no accountability. There's zero accountability across the board as far as the political elites. Nobody has taken accountability for this. And more importantly, the voters have never held them accountable for their poor decisions. They've never done it.
How do you do that, though? Is the vote the only way the accountability works? I mean, obviously, it seems like that's the only way to hold people accountable. But, is there, I mean, I go back and the latest insanity in my mind of kind of just the intense abuse of power was Maxine Waters calling for more, more confrontation in the streets. I mean, that's exactly what Minnesota needs right now, right? Is more riots and more businesses getting burned and more people dying. And yeah, that's real healthy. And but as you go down, you stair step across the totality of the last 20 years. How do you get people accountable? I mean, is the vote the only way, or is there a possibility for, let's say, whoever moves into the next generation, right? Next generation, maybe we get more of us in office, or more people that are sick of it, or more independents, or more libertarians, or whatever it might be, get in there. And how do they get in? Is it having some type of, evaluation, for like a peer evaluation? All right. You've taken the lead on this amount of stuff. Here are the metrics of failure and whatever.
Right.
And this is what the standard of success is. If you implement a budget, you need to be able to have a 70%, success rate of whatever it is. But man, there is none of that. There is no criteria other than the vote. And I think that's interesting. That's why I'm a big supporter of term limits. I'm a big supporter of not letting people just languish in more financial opportunities. And that seems to be what a lot of it has to do with. But how do we bring that back in there? How do we instill a greater leadership requirement?
Boy, I tell you, I wish we could solve that problem, right? Where when you think about it, and I do have a lot of respect for the legislative process. Like, it's very complicated. You have to take into a lot of different variables. Dan, I think, has been instrumental in really understanding, or giving me a greater understanding as to how complex it is. And I think that the minimum qualification, right, as far as like the expectation for people to run for office and who they are, there has to be some type of substantive resume there, other than, okay, well, and there really isn't. I'm just a citizen of the United States. And you can just go and get elected.
There is a beauty to that, though. There is a beauty to that.
I like that. I have no problem with some of this, right? Which is, there has to be term limits. There has to be a legal forfeiture of, we'll call it the ability for a person to profit from their position. You have to forfeit that.
Yep.
And that's during and after. Like it's if you're going to go, you're going to forfeit your ability to profit from this position. So you can't write a book. You can't, be a national New York Times bestseller and get a $10 million book deal. You have to be a person that is truly dedicated to the people. You can't have your husband or your wife buy stock under a different holding company and, make hundreds of millions of dollars, no bid contracts, or, I just read something where Pelosi just bought something like $10 million worth of Microsoft stock 2 weeks before they announced one of the largest government contracts ever awarded to Microsoft. And so here's a person that's worth $100 million already. How on earth did you accumulate that type of wealth throughout your profession as a servant to the people? I don't know. I think I have a good theory.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there has to be an expectation that if you're going to serve the people, you have to take essentially a servant's wage. And when I say that, that's what it is, if a person is successful, they can go off and they can, take that job and still maintain their wealth to a certain degree, but there has to be a separation there. But a lot of these politicians, they've been able to directly monetize and directly benefit from their positions. And not only them, but it's them and their husbands, their wives, like their entire family. They've been able to enrich and engorge themselves with just kind of gluttonous abuse of power. And trust me when I say this, I am a capitalist, but it has to be done from the business perspective. And we've made politics a business.
100%.
And when you make politics a business, and when you can individually profit from your name being represented out there in either Congress or Senate or any of these things. And Dan has actually talked a lot about this. There's a lot of things he can and can't do, right? And he has to maintain 2 households, for instance. So he has to have a household in DC and he has to have a household in Texas. On $170,000 a year, 2 households, like that's a lot. That takes a lot. Mm-hmm. Like you truly are sacrificing for that. People say, well, that's a lot of money. Not when you have to live in Washington, DC, when you're flying back and forth, you're on the road all the time. Like you're truly a servant of the people at that point. And by the way, if it wasn't profitable, why are people staying in it for 40 plus years and becoming millionaires?
Multi-millionaires. Not just like I left and I had like 2 million in the bank. They're leaving with 100 million.
Yeah, 100 million.
$400 million in the Clinton Foundation.
Right?
Whatever. Yeah.
So it's pure insanity to me for one, I think a big problem with this is the media complacency.
Yep.
Right. Mainstream media journalism is dead.
I just think it's changed.
The boot.
You can go back, Evan, you know this, brother. You could go back to the times of Teddy Roosevelt and small town papers writing stories against JP Morgan and Andrew Carnegie.
True.
And there's always, you can go back to the Revolutionary War and there's tons of articles and what was it, the Free Beacon of Boston, where they're condemning George Washington for, biting the hand that feeds you or what. There's always been, there's always been. And I think what is always nice is, again, it goes back to the individual's choice, right? Am I going to be educated in a silo, or am I going to educate myself as to the totality of what's happening? And that's what I think needs to happen. You have this what my favorite was Tim Scott from South Carolina called it the woke supremacy, right? It's their It's this new ideology of racism, right? And then what's happening underneath it is there's a growing awakening coming out and saying, we're not fans with this biased stuff, and we're just going to stop listening.
Right.
CNN has lost half its viewership. Right?
Isn't that crazy? 54%.
It's awesome. That's the system working, NBA ratings are off by 60%. What awards? It was the last awards, which was the Grammys or something. They were off by 67%, and so it's happening. It's just, we can't see it. We can't feel it. But what we do see is the pummeling every day, and so, I think people are afraid to step away from the line in the sand right now.
Yeah.
They're saying, hey, you know what? You idiots fight it out over here. I'm going to come over here. Right. I'm going to look at what you guys are doing, and I'm going to figure out what makes sense to me. And I think that's why, going back to the main construct of leadership, that's what you guys can offer, right? That's what you can offer people, is saying, hey, let's take at a legitimate look at both these arguments. Let's look at what Tulsi Gabbard has to say, and let's look at what Dan Crenshaw, and when you pare it down, it's relatively the same thing. Yeah. Maybe a few individualized efforts in and of itself, but there's a relative, a harmonious concept within there that America is a great place, and let's figure out how to bring that back.
Yeah, and the thing of it is complex dialogue and debate should be encouraged. Right? Information should be encouraged, but the problem is that people are trying to do it within 120 characters or less, and then it devolves. And honestly, we should be evolving into a more complex society that has really advanced conversations, because we have so much information access. And I was having this conversation with somebody the other day on universal minimum wage, right? Mm-hmm. So kind of a $15 an hour across the board, federal government, blah, blah, blah.
How would that affect you guys after you tell the story? I'd like to know.
It wouldn't affect us. I think we have very few positions in the company that are below that at the end of the day. And honestly, like one of the charters of my company this year is to increase the overall minimum earner by well surpass that, because I think my goal is to recruit and hire the best people into the position. And if I'm paying minimum wage, that tells the system that we can only recruit and hire at this level. So I've got to increase that a drastic amount so we can try to recruit and hire better. When I say the people here are incredible. When we're looking into the future, we really have to focus on paying people more money. We have to focus on their work environment. So it's creating the best fucking company in America, right? Mm-hmm. So building the best fucking company, we have to pay more money. We have to have better health benefits. We have to have better both economic and management opportunities from within. Like we have to do all those things, or I'm not meeting my mission, right? I'm not actually meeting and exceeding my minimum success criteria for my mission. So if I've set the standard on that, I have to hold myself accountable, which means you have to sacrifice some short-term profit to make sure that you can reach your minimum success criteria for your mission, right? Mm-hmm. And so the conversation, to kind of go back to what my conversation was, is somebody was telling me, well, this is really good for the country, and this will be a really good thing. Like, I have a lot of experience with the federal government. There's no debating this, right? There's no debating that a person should be paid for the time, because they're exchanging money for their time. And the more valuable you make yourself, the more valuable you will be for the company, and the more money you'll be able to exchange for your time. That's just the way like a capitalist structure works. But when the government forces individual businesses to do things, it typically is like a shoe. And the analogy that I said was, if the government was to give everybody a shoe, like shoes, a pair of shoes. What the government would do is they would say, okay, so everybody in the United States, what is your shoe size? And they would say, okay, here's the shoe size from top to bottom. The largest shoe is going to be like a 16. The smallest shoe is going to be like a 1 or whatever, right?
Right.
Like, okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to give everybody that 16.
And you'll grow into it.
Yeah. So the guy that has a, like me, I've got a size 10. I'm gonna be like, dude, this is way too big. Like if it's perfect for the 16, he's like, this is great. 15, 16, this is great. I love these shoes. They're amazing. It's the most amazing thing ever. I got my free pair of shoes right?
from the government.
Yeah. But it doesn't fit the majority of the United States. It doesn't fit the majority of it. But
right.
A lot of legislation, and when I say this, it's like it doesn't fit. And when it doesn't fit, then you have to say, okay, well, how do we make it fit? It's like, well, maybe you take it down to the individual municipality. And this is when I start to be really kind of on the conservative side of the fence, where I'm like, if we have local solutions, fixing local problems, that typically comes up with a more curated, better representative of the community, right?
Absolutely.
So if there's only 800 people in a small town in Wyoming, they're like, all right, well, everybody needs a pair of shoes. Well, let's figure it out how we're going to get it done. Then you can kind of figure that out. So the perspective that I have on kind of universal minimum wage, or I figure out there's a couple other conversations out there that they're defining it differently, but like it doesn't work for everybody. And honestly, the government, every time they force businesses to do something, right? And but when I say this, I'm all about certain environmental regulations, because corporations can be run for they can be very exploitive in their practices, and ultimately they can really cause a lot of harm environmentally, and we've proven that. I think over the course of generations in the United States, like there are business practices that are directly detrimental to the environment. There are business practices that are directly detrimental to humans, right?
Oh,
so
absolutely.
we know that. But if we have a lot of economic opportunity and economic growth to be a successful business, you have to build a better culture and ecosystem. You have to become better at recruiting talent and paying more and providing better healthcare and keeping them. That's when free market comes into play, because if you have a shitty work environment with a shitty company, you won't succeed. You'll go by the way of the dodo. You will die. The company will die. But that's why it's so important for, I think, countries, to, at least our country, to be economically successful and continue to provide, I think, growth to the economy or opportunities throughout the economy. Right? We have to be competitive in the international market. We have to be locally and regionally competitive. That's why entrepreneurs and business people, they really are very important to this entire apparatus that we've created. And anytime I think the federal government starts getting too involved in business, it becomes stifling. And then you don't grow. You don't create those opportunities. Everybody becomes equal. And then at the end of the day, really poor businesses that would have never succeeded will succeed even in spite of themselves.
Oh,
they'll maintain, they'll keep lagging and hitting. And you're like, dude, can you just go away? Like, like just go away. And not all businesses need to survive either. Unfortunately, people always think like, well, businesses need to survive. I'm like, I'm all about good businesses. We need to put that precursor word in there. Good businesses need to survive. Shitty businesses need to go away. Like they need to go away. It's natural attrition. It needs to go away. It's evolution.
And I think, when you look at what's going on now, and I'm involved now as a result of the events industry being decimated, as well as, being locked out of accessing about 100,000 people, I had to pivot because I was like, all right, man, I need to pivot. So I got involved in a couple small businesses that are growing. One's an armor company and one is a medical technology company. And it's for the first time since I started Frog Logic back in 2006, I have that excitement about business development and growth and trajectory and how we're going to position ourselves against the competition. And I'm in, creating decks and giving pitches and, I'm out there hustling again. And it's really fascinating to me because it's like, all right, what is the business environment look like right now? And what you notice is, man, there has been such a movement towards, kind of dominant business, just controlling a market space in such an excruciating level that it's pushed out that competitive reality that's there. And I think, that is the thing that stifles people's desire to want to take that chance, to make that risk, where entrepreneurialism is a little quash. And especially after last year, all the small businesses have been decimated. But we need to get back and have leaders like you and people like me to say, no, all right, let's try something new. Let's get back in the fight. Let's go after this. And that's why it's so critical that we do see from our leadership in the political apparatus that there are antitrust lawsuits against the Googles and the Facebooks and all these other monsters out there and the unionization of Google or whatever it might be. And because it creates, like you said, there's got to be space for opportunity. Otherwise, there's no the funneling of control and power into a few that control all, man, that's not good at all. And
no, because that becomes essentially a self-controlled dictatorship in a capitalist market. It becomes a dictatorship in business. And a lot of people will say, well, that's the free market. Like, okay, I'm not arguing the free market. I'm not arguing that Walmart has been successful and there's a reason why they're successful. But what we have to kind of, I think, understand is what is it that we want and expect from our buying experience. And if you have a large scale retailer, whether it's Amazon or Walmart, and they control the majority of the market, we do have to look for opportunities to seed new initiatives and new ideas to make the landscape more competitive. So putting rules in the game doesn't make the game less fun. It makes the game more competitive.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think ethics, right? So as a society, when we decide these are ethics, and really that's kind of the premise of legislation. When we talk about ethics, it's how do we compete internationally? So how does America compete on the international global economic scale? How do we compete? How do we compete internally? How do we build communities? That's a whole other conversation that directly feeds into this, which is when we talk about the opportunities in America to have true economic mobility, we really do have to look at places in the United States where they haven't had a lot of opportunity, right? So,
I agree.
Where is the lack of opportunity where it's directly contributing to incarceration, drug use, a lack of family values, so single income, families. Where are those? So when I say ethics in business, we're putting rules and making things more competitive, but we're also shaping the nation the way that we want it. And I would rather do that, figure out ways that we can create really incredible economic opportunities that will reshape sections of our nation and build opportunities than saying there's a universal minimum wage. I don't necessarily know how that will help or directly contribute to
that was the old
communities.
That was the old Chamber of Commerce model, right? I mean, you create a Chamber of Commerce for business leaders like you. They come in, they look around, they foster each other's businesses. They cross promote each other's businesses. They see where there's a need, and they go out into other areas and recruit businesses to come in and say, hey, there's a void here. We'd love to have your business look at our Chamber of Commerce. But all of that has been, decimated down to this, a place where unless companies like yours or other companies that have the means or the influence can go and say, hey, we're going to put a Black Rifle Coffee in the middle of this space and hire people, or we're going to create small business loans through this program and help these companies get funded and seed and start a company, and then we'll teach them how to do their books, or we'll help them mentor them, and start building up, like you said, these areas for opportunity instead of just the gentrification of the surrounding area to condense the poverty areas into such a strict and small unit that, now all the other people, and it's so funny. I was reading something the other day that, these draconian measures that have been placed on a lot of key strategic economic hubs and who are driving people out is really just the setup for the vultures to come in, purchase all the real estate, the commercial real estate at a low price, right? And come in and implement a whole new system or create their opportunities, And I'm like, wow, that'd be sinister if that's the reality. But, you never know. It could be. So
you never know. Like I look at it as like, man, I'm glad that people are fleeing California. I really am. I think it should be an eye opener for the California legislative body to say, are we doing everything that we can to maintain the economic integrity, opportunities and fulfillment for the people within the state? Are we doing it or are we not? I don't know, because Texas seems to be winning over there a little bit more than we are over here. Now, I could be wrong, maybe they've built such a fantastic utopia, 15% tax rate and, shoveling, needles off their streets.
65,000 homeless people.
Yeah. Like maybe that's a utopian dream for a lot of these people. Maybe that's where they want to live, right? It's like, maybe that's your thing. If you like watching people, defecate in your sidewalk and, raising your family in that environment, maybe that's their thing. It's not my thing. It's not what I kind of want to do with my time or raise my family in that environment. So if that's what they want to do in San Francisco, by all means, man. Like, you guys do you.
Yeah.
Hey, that's also what I believe in, right? It's like, hey, they don't have to move there. I'm not going to live there. So individual municipalities should be free to kind of do whatever kind of social experiment they want, as long as it doesn't cost me any money, like in Texas or Utah, right? As long as I'm not paying for it. You guys do you. Like, have fun. Have fun.
Enjoy. Have at it.
Enjoy. Have at it, guys. Like
taking the 9th largest economy in the world and decimating it because you're mismanaged money,
But you know what? You're going to you're going to be able to go to your restaurant. Gavin's going to be able to go to his restaurant, not wear a mask and eat at French Laundry. He's going to be able to go to French Laundry. Dave,
no worries, bud.
Dude, it's always fucking rad to talk to you, man. Like, we got to do this. We got to schedule it like every month or something. Like, we got to get into a cadence of just like hammering down. You know what I mean?
The only thing that I care about is you and your mental health, and that you're not being spread out too thin. And I'm always here. If you ever want to have one of these talks, there's not many people I get to actually have these talk with, especially on a microphone with. And so I always am praying that you're okay and you're hanging in there and you're doing well, and everybody around you is doing well. And I'm always here, brother. I'm always happy to chat with you whenever you want, bud.
Man, I love you, Dave Rutherford. Thank you so much for being on Free Range, buddy. I can't wait to get you back. We got to get Sean out here on one of these too. The three of us need to just talk shit for like an hour.
We need to come and do a road trip out there and hang out, guys. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about doing some things together, and I think once we figure that out, we'll know in the next few
Mike Glover's out here. So it's like you, me, Mike, and Sean can do a fucking episode. It'd be like 2 Green Berets and 2 Navy SEALs just talk shit. You know what I mean? It'd be a great episode.
That'd be fun. Well, I'd probably be coming out there soon. You know, I've been working with a company out in your area for a few years. And so I might be coming out there again soon and working with them. So if I am, we'll see what we can set up, brother.
Fire it up.
All right. Love you, buddy. God bless.